In this video I'm going to show you how to create functions. Functions are something that we commonly use in R. Everything is done using a function, but how to create a function that does something that you want to do on your own. Let me start with a basic function that does nothing, absolutely nothing. So to create a function, I will call this do nothing. That's the name of the function, and I put an arrow and use function open paren close paren, and whatever declaration you have to do for the function would go between set brackets, and that would be it. That is a function, and if I run it, do nothing appears in your environment. Keep in mind, any user-defined function would only be stored in your current environment. The moment you close R, or if you start a new session, the function would disappear and you have to reload it. By running it or by creating it in an external file and sourcing that external file, and I'll show you how to do that later. Let's do a function, do something, and this time I'm going to create a function, and it would actually create a string, hello, save it to a variable, vector, and I will return vector. I'm running this again, and this time I'll type do something in the console, and it returns hello. But what if I commented return back? If I commented that and typed do something, I will not be getting anything back from the function. So if you want to return something from the function, you should always use return. If you look at the two functions that we've created, neither of them have input parameters. They're just basic functions with no input parameters. Now I'm going to create a function with par, and this time I'm going to pass parameters. I'm going to pass them as A, B, and C. So it is a 3-parameter function, and I would like to add these three variables, 3 input variables, save it to D, have A plus B plus C, and I will return D. Now, when I type with par and I specify 1, 2, 3, of course we get an answer of 6. Now what if you forget a parameter in a 3-parameter function when you run it? So we know that when we defined the function we had with parameter and 3 input parameters A, B, C, but now when I run the function, when I execute it, I'm executing with only 2 values for 2 parameters. You end up getting an error, and it clearly states argument C is missing with no default. The important phrase here is with no default. What does it mean? So we're going to go back to the function, and I will set an initial value of 5 for C, and I will source it, and I'm going to repeat the same process as I did before. widthPar function being executed with only 2 parameters. You can see the answer is 8. Previously, when we did it, we got an error that said C is missing with no default. But now that I have specified a default value for C, it would actually use that value 5 as a default value. So A is 1, B is 2, C is 5. So when you sum them, you get a value 8. Now, what if I go back and suggested A as 1, B as 2, and C as 10? The answer is 13. So you've got to keep in mind the default value would only be used if you don't specify a value for C. The moment you specify a value 10 for C, the answer would be different because R would use the current value of C that's being supplied. Now, in all of these in the previous cases, we either returned nothing or we just returned a single variable. But I'm going to create a new function with ls. I will actually have A, B, C, 3 variables, and I'd like to create another variable, A plus B plus C, which is the sum of the 3 input variables, E, A times B times C, which is the product of the 3 variables, and I'd like to return both of them. So I would return D and E, but I don't want to use the same name. And if you want to return both these parameters, you've got to say list equals C, D, E. So I'm just using the same name for the time being. So run, and with ls, I'll specify 3, 1, 2, and 3, or 1, 2, and 5. You can see I get 2 answers. The first one is 8 and the second one is 10. The first one is the sum of the 3 input values. The second is the product of the 3 input values. If I saved this to a variable, the output of a function to a variable, say m, when I type m, I still get 8 and 10. This is because we're just returning a basic list. But if you wanted to give names as to what's being returned, for instance, I would like to call the sum that's being returned as sum. I'd go back and say sum equals D and product equals E in the function. So when I run this with ls 1, 2, and 5, you can see sum is 8 and prod is 10. It tells you that sum is 8 and product is 10. I could save this function to a variable, say w, and when I run it, again sum is 8 and prod is 10. The advantage of using variable names and returning values from a function is that you can access them using their names. For instance, you could say w of sum and it should give you 8. In a similar manner, w of product, that was an error, w of product, you get 10. So this is how you create a function. Of course, you can create more complicated functions as long as you follow the same construct.